Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Daryoush, welcome to the show.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. You have a very interesting name. You were saying it comes from Darius, or that's like the newer way of saying that, correct?
Daryoush is the Greek pronunciation of it that most Americans know it by, but it was the name of a Persian king, and we do pronounce it as Daryoush.
Are you Persian then?
Oh yes, the job of running the country as a king was a little bit stressful, so I switched to art.
That's brilliant. Oh my God. This is so going to be an incredible conversation. And so a Persian, wow. I feel very honored. There's something deep within the cells of my being that have now perked up and ready to receive water. And I'm not sure why, but over the last month, I have found I've been attracted, in a sense, to these guys that, you know, in terms of respect, and all of them were Persians, and I was like, whoa, and like I knew one
very
was
good looking too. So if there's any other reason you're attracted to them, that's fine.
Well, there isn't. You guys are too hairy for me if I was. But Daryoush, like, I'll tell you how I'm remembering your name, because it was very difficult at first. When I wrote it down, I broke it down into three different phrases, and it's kind of funny. When I was a little boy, my favorite movie was Beastmaster, and the main character, his name was Dar. And so I'm like, okay, so Beastmaster, right? That's how I'm remembering your name. And then the middle part is just, you, Y-O-U, which I'm writing it in English, right? So because that's the sound that comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part, Daryoush, right? In Portugal, a lot of Portuguese words end in this long S sound. Why can't I even think of one right now? But it's like these osh sound. And so
your technique works perfectly, because other people don't pronounce it as well as you do, and you got it pretty quickly.
Daryoush. So were you born then in I'm going to call it Persia, but if people need to know, I guess that's Iran, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now explain to me real quick. Well, first of all, I know I'm bouncing around in this conversation because there's a lot going on in my head right now.
I'm big on bouncing myself.
So, just for everybody who's listening, understand that this conversation, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about ideas, concepts, storytelling, seeing the poetry in life versus the painting and the drawing type of skill sets. In great art, you need to be able to communicate a message, but you also have to have a message to communicate. And so this is going to be one of those conversations that's going to be much more about the stories that we're telling and how we find them and where they come from, versus the way that we actually scribe that out on a canvas. So what what's the difference between Persia or being Persian and Iran and being Iranian?
Persian is usually something you're more proud of.
Okay.
Throughout the history, the name, I can't tell you exactly when it was changed, but Persian Empire was much larger. And it was kind of what the United States is to the world today, back then to the planet. It spanned from Africa to east of India, and even currently in Iran, you have different languages, dialects, and cultures within the size of the country that is not much bigger than Texas. So Persia refers to the older times in Iran, where kings were running the show, and Iran is more recent, but it is the same thing.
Okay, so it's the same thing in terms of the geographical location and the genetics of the people, in a sense. But
yes.
Persia connects you to the regality of your history, the royal aspect of your history, and so it's almost like, in a weird way, like you're identifying with a different form of government, in a sense. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. Today, Iran is more of a democracy, and by the leaders are mostly selected by election. Back then, there were kings that would run the country either by killing their dad or just inheriting it from them.
And you're not calling us from Persia right now, are you?
No. I'm in Maryland.
Oh, okay. You're in Maryland. Cool.
Yeah, I have lived in U.S. longer than I have lived in Iran.
Okay. And when did you leave Iran? When did you leave?
1984.
Wow. That's cool, man. That's cool. Do you ever go back to visit?
I went back once. I came to U.S. and as a refugee, so.
Okay, gotcha.
It's a bit difficult.
Interesting. Well, not that you need to hear it, but welcome.
Thank you.
So we're gonna have a lot of great. So you better get ready for the end of this conversation, because when we start talking about food, I want to hear some Persian food coming from you.
Oh yes, we got a lot for you.
Now, are you married? I'm not asking. I'm not asking. I'm just wondering.
Yes, I am. To the surprise of my friends, somebody was crazy enough to go for it.
Cool. And is she Persian as well, or is she from somewhere?
No, she's American, but her family history goes mostly to Italy and a little bit of German and French.
Oh, wow. Very, very cool, man. Very cool.
It is cool.
Yeah. And do you guys have kids?
No, we chose freedom.
Oh my God. Okay, that works. My brother would probably relate to that very much. So, he's almost 40 and they don't have any kids, and but they have a very interesting life. He's a magician, so he travels around the world, and yeah, when you don't have kids, it allows you a certain freedom. And
well, we enjoy our family kids and let them worry about changing the diapers.
That's awesome. That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. So let's bring it up to now. You're working on some work, okay? And I'm kind of curious, what are the ideas that you're pursuing or trying to go deeper into and trying to understand and communicate with people? What are some of the stories or ideas that you're pursuing?
I try not to narrow it down to a specific subject. I try to get impressed by anything that happens during my daily life because I really believe that we are not as special as our moms told us we were. Uh, and I think that's a good thing because that's how we communicate. If we don't have things in common, then there's no point in doing art, poetry, or uh, movies or anything because all of that hinges on the fact that we're similar. We come from the same places, we have same needs, and same kind of things drives all of us. So I don't try to uh, look for ideas that I think other people might be attracted to. I think uh, any of us have a lot of people out there that are like us. So if you find something that is interesting to you or you find it amusing, there's a pretty good chance there's a lot of other people that do too. Uh, so to me, uh, any artist, poet, musician, uh, at first they have to try to impress themselves before they try to impress anybody else. And once you're able to do that, I think you're going to be okay. And with me is the same thing. Like for example, uh, one of my paintings is an old man and a kid that are holding hands. And when I saw that, uh, that brought a lot of memories with me and my grandfather. And it was in the farmers market in Baltimore. It's many of these things happen in not in not such a mysterious place or I think job of an artist is to convey the emotion of it more than the reality of the environment. So that's something that I related to, and I think having a granddad or becoming a granddad is pretty common out there. So I don't have to work hard to make somebody else feel the same thing I felt when I saw that. Um, so most of the experiences that I have had is basically something that left an impression on me, as I think most likely is the case with most artists. And I believe that there is a certain sequence that should be uh, paid attention to art. First, you need to uh, catch the eye with visual art at least, then the heart, and then the mind.
Oh, that's cool.
And I, at least when I go to a museum or to a gallery, the stuff that stop me on my track, they have done that. They usually from a distance, they grab my attention by the way they look. And when I come closer, then they hit me with their message, something that it is saying. It doesn't have to be anything intellectual. It could be as simple as beauty of a flower, because everybody appreciates beauty. That's something that emotionally might touch you. And then I have another flower painting too. And it was the same thing. When I painted it, it was just a flower first. And I understand that a lot of folks would expect and advertise the idea of having everything lined up before you start a painting, which I hope someday I can do. But at the time, I have the attention span of the fruit fly, and pulling that off is a little bit difficult. So I sometimes I just start the painting by the way that the look of it, the lines, the shapes, the colors impress me. And like the flower that I painted, it started with that just a flower. Then my daily life brought the attention, my attention to the point that how temporary everything is. As I'm getting older, I'm becoming more sensitive to the fact that I have a certain number of heartbeats left. So
Mm.
then that gave me the idea to put a younger flower in front of the one I painted and an older one behind it, faded,
Mm.
to add the message to it. So not always the message is the first thing that comes to mind. Sometimes it's the meaningless painting just because of its emotional impact and its look, and the message is added later. And sometimes the message is first, like um, with the there was a it was more of a study than painting of um, this guy that is base jumping with a swallow. That was I thought of the idea first because I just love these birds. They have a lot in common with humans. You see
Mm.
these guys on a crush rockets on a road with a like 160 miles an hour speed passing you by,
Mm-hmm.
not caring whether or not they're going to be road pizza 2 seconds later. The same thing, I see that in these birds. I remember in Iran, north of the country, near Caspian Sea, I would see these birds go head to head with a 2,000, 3,000 pound car and just go under the car and come out the other end and go
What?
over a car behind it. And they do that with walls, with just to, you can tell they're thrill seeking creatures. They,
Hmm.
so I painted that next to the uh, guy on a wingsuit. It's because I used to be pretty stupid myself when I was younger, and I did a lot of these stuff. Uh, so these are the things that personally I relate to. Um, I have to bring up the rest of the paintings too, if I want to get the specific. I don't want to take over the conversation, so you
No, this
you
is
tell
good,
me
man.
which
This
way
is
to go.
good. This is good. Um, I'm trying to listen and hear a pattern in it. Um, I think as humans, we're pattern creatures, and even though sometimes we think we're random, there's more likely a pattern that's underlining things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just listening to see, and so one thing I'm picking up on, like between the flower painting, the grandfather painting, as well as the bird painting, is ultimately they're all self portraits, and you're seeing yourself in those moments. Um,
Hmm.
one of We have a guy at the academy. He's name's Bill, and he's our CYO, our Chief Yoda Officer. And he turned 72 yesterday, and
Wow.
um, and so he's just full of Yoda wisdom. And one of the things he always tells me is that you only meet yourself, and
Hmm.
with every person you meet, every experience you meet, everything's a mirror, and everything that comes to you is just a reflection, or yeah, reflection of you, right? And so you
Yeah,
only meet yourself. And so even though it looked like a little boy and a grandfather, you met yourself, right? It might look like a
that's true.
bird, but you met yourself. And
That's true. Hmm. That's a good piece of wisdom.
yeah, he comes up with a bunch of those every once in a while. Every once in a while, meaning like every day. Uh, but yeah, yeah. So I find, it's interesting. I was exploring these compositions, and there was this very ever since I was young, there was this image, this collection that I wanted to do. I always called it my Karmasita
Hmm.
images, but there are always these long women with dark long hair.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe that's why the cells in my body like the Persian sound. Um, As long as the long dark hair only stays on the top of the head. No, just joking. Um, so and when I was in Portugal, I designed this composition called "Ladies by the Sea," and it was these women, and they were like these very strong pillar-like figures. Um, and when I draw them, it what comes out is a design and a story and a composition that I can feel is very, very authentic to my soul. And the other day I was at a funeral and I saw these women and they're all dressed in black. um, and they had long black hair. Uh, and then they created this very dark shape, right? And their faces
Yeah.
were talking among each other. And the same thing in this Lady of the Seas was they formed these dark shapes, but the women were talking to each other. And so but at the bottom was this little kid in a stroller playing on some iPhone or whatever, and she was off in her own little world. She didn't even realize she was at a funeral.
Hmm.
Um, and then I drew that out, and I'm like, and it felt authentic to me. It felt real. Like, whoa, this is my message. And I
Hmm.
realized that when I feel that way, it's almost the same figures that are coming out. It's these women who are in heavy dark clothes with long dark hair, light complexion, but
Yeah.
speaking to each other. And the light complexion because of the contrast that their faces become silhouetted in their hair.
Hmm.
But the key is this then designing the conversation and these groups of women. And so it's something I want to explore, but I'm trying to figure out, what that is about. And the only thing I can think about it probably has to do relate to my mother because she had very thick, long black hair
Hmm.
when I was a kid. Um, and and so that's when I'm hearing when I listen to other artists telling their stories and what calls to them, what's the muse that's saying, "Psst, psst, psst, look at me over here, give me a body, give me a mess, give me voice." Um, I'm trying to hear that, and it,
I'm
it
kind of afraid of the voice.
yeah.
I keep hearing other artists looking for it. I really enjoy being lost. They just having anything as a potential and possibility for me to explore is really precious to me. If I see like artists that just paint horses, just paint dancers,
Mm-hmm.
and become expert at it. Uh,
Well, let's not get confused
I
here.
yes.
A voice isn't um the subject that you paint,
Hmm.
right? So those are two very different things.
Okay, tell me.
The voice, the voice that I hear in you is about youth, right? I
Hmm.
mean, you drew this flower, and all of a sudden now you're thinking of your heartbeats that you have left over, right? And then you put this young
Yes.
flower in front of this old one. You're looking at an old man and a young man, right? You're looking at uh, the birds flying in a way that reminds you about what when you were young and crazy, let's say, right?
Hmm.
So to me, I hear a voice in all of that because there's a similar heartbeat, a similar vibe through them all. Um,
Hmm.
and it's not the subject, it's not the drawing, right? It's not, oh, am I a figurative artist or am I a nature art? That's not what it is. It's the
Hmm.
energy that's underneath it.
Gotcha.
And and
Well, maybe I have
it's
one
there.
then.
It's there. uh
Okay, good.
tell me two or three other paintings because I'd like to kind of explore this a little bit with you. Um two or three other paintings over the last several years that you produced or even just throughout your life that resonate with you, that when you did them, maybe it wasn't just the painting itself but just the process or what it was about that really are clear in you, like you just felt like you were in a different dimension and what you produced or saw was something deeper or greater than maybe you normally would do.
Sure. The, um, there is one other vase, and I forgot name of these flowers that their seeds start flying in the with the wind.
Dandelions.
Yes.
Mhm.
I painted that initially to get ready for a workshop that I was taking with David Chaffetz, and wanted to uh, emulate his style as far as the tabletops and things like that goes before I take the workshop. But then I started adding the vase on top of it, and then dandelion, and that one, I do connect to it because as long as these seeds are attached to the mother, they have a pretty uneventful life. But as soon as uh, they leave with the wind, anything is a possibility, and that's kind of I relate to it because when I left Iran, that opened up all kinds of possibilities. When I came to U.S., I kind of when you live in a certain environment with the same people, your parents, your family, you have developed a personality that is trying to satisfy the expectations of your environment. When your environment and people that you deal with on an everyday basis changes, that gives you a little bit of freedom to pick who you are. And that happened to me when I came here. I noticed that when I wanted to be open and free when I talk to people, I automatically switched to English, even when those were Persians that did understand Farsi. So that painting is kind of relates to that phase of my life. There is another one recently that I did of a parrot with a barely visible raven in the background. This is because of what is going on today, that everybody's so crazy about getting attention on Facebook, on social media, on anything you can imagine. And I have noticed I might be going down the wrong path with that myself, because everybody else is doing it. And I started noticing the cost of it. Every time that I was checking a message on the Facebook or on Instagram or on the web in general, or planning for the business of art, I found myself doing less of the actual art I was interested in. So that, I think, is the case, not necessarily just with art, with everything else. We do things a lot of times based on habit. Getting attention is becoming more and more of that as well. This last week I was in a conference for my day job, and it was just like that. People were chasing you down on these exhibit halls, trying to scan your tag so they can get your attention later with junk mail. That's what today's world is all about. It's just getting attention, and a lot of times the cost of it is not worth the benefit. So having to choose when you want to get attention and evaluate whether or not it's worth it is something that I think we need to think a little bit more about, because before automatically doing it because everybody else does it. What else did I do? Let's see. Oh, there was a painting of a gorilla. That was one of the first paintings I did. We went to DC Zoo. I don't know if they call it National Zoo or what's the official name for it is. But there was a humongous gorilla in there that it just looked majestic. And it didn't belong in there. It's a really, really small space. And that kind of left an impression on me. But he still looked pretty proud. And that kind of touched me as far as how important our freedoms are in any format. Uh, so the frame for that one is actually a door to a cabinet that I got from IKEA, uh, and
That's cool.
added the butterfly to emphasize the point.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful.
Oh, and guy jumping out out of the water with a dolphin that actually, I think you saw it on the Facebook. That actually happened to me. I was in Maui, and um, that was the first time I was trying that. And a school of dolphins from the distance, they were jumping, and two of them broke off and just came right at me, and they started jumping around with me. It's like 10 feet away from what I was doing there.
Wow. And what did that make you feel like?
That was amazing. It's just having these creatures free is something else. It's just, I wish I knew what I was doing so I could play around with them a little more, but I barely was keeping myself out of the water. So these guys started jumping around for a while, trying to get me to play with them, but then they realized I didn't know what I was doing, and they got bored and took off. But that was one of the coolest things that happened in nature to me.
You know, there's a tribe on one of these islands. I believe it's in the for some reason I want to think it's over near Hawaii, but for generations they have coexisted with dolphins. And what they do is they go out to the beach and they lay out their nets, and then I guess the men or the people go out into the water and they clap their hands underneath the water, and the dolphins hear it, and the dolphins come rushing in towards the shore, scaring all the driving all the fish into the fishermen's nets. Then they pull in all the fish, and they take some for themselves and they give some to the dolphins. And they've been doing it for right. It's like, wow. You know, I hear a very, very similar thread. You know, one could call it your golden thread. Throughout every single one of your paintings, every single one. And
I'm curious what that is.
Well, then come around next time, and you will find out. No. After this commercial break.
Man.
Actually, before I tell you, I am going to do a commercial break if you don't mind.
This is killing me. Come
on. Yeah, I'm going to do a commercial break. Hold on one second. Hey, if anybody out there wants to learn about emotions and how to convey them in your artwork, I'm doing a course this summer on it. So go to www.donvictorart.com/summer.
All right.
So this is what it's about. It's about knowing how to sense this energy and see it. And the energy that's going on in you is freedom, man. And the reality is, it probably, you know, you said that you're a refugee, so there's probably some trauma there, that you're fleeing from something, you know, and but I love that, you know, your whole experience seeing the dolphins were beautiful to you, but what really impacted you from what you were saying was the fact that two of them broke off from the herd, right, and came out and play with you, and what you said, you used the word freedom again, right? When you started talking about the vase, I was like, oh, it's a vase, and there's a blooming, right? So something's bloomed, and then the fact that you made dandelions that, you know, blow into the wind, it makes total sense, right? It's the same thing as the birds, right? It's just a different form.
You might have something there. Yeah, I'm looking at another painting I did, which is, this one is not original, actually, it's from someone else's photo. There's a Chinese fisherman that they use these birds to do the fishing.
Oh, really?
Cormorants.
Oh,
yes.
Cool.
So what happens? They tie a knot to cormorants' legs and let them dive and fish, and they have another piece of string around their neck so they can't swallow the fish. They come back up. The fisherman takes the fish out of their mouth, and they do this all day, and they just let let them eat the last fish, and that's what they do every day with them. So when you mentioned the freedom, I realized uh, the concept behind all of that is freedom as well. You might have something.
I would really encourage you to look at that, man, because when we're sensitive, it's interesting. There's this, I don't know where it's at, but there's this little passage in the Bible that says something along the lines that God gives every person two angels, right? And when I
Mm-hmm.
was, outside of like a multitude of this and that, but like two angels that are assigned to each human. Now, when I was younger, I used to think of that in terms of the physical. Oh my gosh, there's two angels, right? And I remember even going through a time like where I was like, oh, I want to know who my two angels are, right?
Yes.
So, and I think if you look at it in terms of nouns, you'll end up like a psycho. Um, but as I began to understand the concept of angel, an angel just means a messenger. So if there's a messenger, that means it's a message, right? And
Yeah.
if God assigns each of us two messages, then the question is, what is our message?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I have been very clear for the last 20 years that my message has been design and fathering, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's everything I'm about. So, like, even when I'm working with my students, right, it's like we're planning, designing, composing, like that aspect of it. And then, uh, and then training them is a way of one could call a fathering type of nature. So it.
I think you need to drop design and get into therapy, man. You're helping me out here.
Well, thank you. Well, that's it's funny. That's what most of my students say. They're like, "Dude, you're like not an art teacher. You're like a therapist." um, yeah, I'll tell you one. Well, I'll tell you a cool story. I had this one student come and she grew. She always wanted to be an artist, right? She came out of Detroit, and but when she wanted to go to art school when she was younger, her mom said, "Why would you want to do that? Um, Art's for the elites. We're not elite." And so she ended up getting a job as someone who did medical records. Um, and she was able to work, she was able to do that from home. So she was able to raise her kids. And then her kids got out of the house and grew up, and her mom and her dad got, old, and so they came and stayed with her. And the kids are out of the house, mom and dad are living with them, and she said to her mom, "Hey, I was thinking about going down and taking a class, an art class down at the thing." And her mom said, "Well, why would you do that? That's for the elites." Same thing she said, 30 years earlier or whatever. And and so after her mom passed away, she decided it was her turn, her time, right?
Mm-hmm.
No kids, her husband had a great living, and so she was going to retire and draw. And so she came to me, and her name was Elaine, and so we called her Elaine the Elite, um, and we made her do these 5 paintings. Um, and I assigned to her that her task was to explore the concept of elitism, like to be elite, because in her
Mm-hmm.
whole life, to be elite was considered a negative connotation. It was a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
So she did these 5 paintings, and one was teaching, one was leadership, one was community, like these different aspects of being an elite, but not a negative connotation, more a positive connotation to it. And so as she went through these 5 paintings, there was so much healing that went on inside of her because she realized that she was Elaine the Elite, that in her family, her father groomed her to lead their clan, basically, that when he passed, the responsibility went on to her. That was a form of being elite within that community. Um, and just all these things. And it was incredible, the appreciation she had for her father, the understanding she had for her mother, the responsibility she had for her family, that all came through exploring these 5 paintings, which had nothing to do with flowers. They
Yeah.
all had to do with different ideas of how do you understand this concept of being elite,
Yes.
and there was a lot of healing that went on in that. So
Exactly.
um so I agree with you, man. It's a beautiful thing when
Very
we get
good.
there. So yeah, so let's explore freedom a little bit more, okay? Because I know there's
Okay.
people listening to this who, some are probably turned this conversation off because we're not talking about paints.
Oh, all right.
Uh,
I can go back into painting.
and some are like, whoa, this resonates with me. And so for the people who are listening that this is kind of resonating, freedom might not be your angel, it might not be your message. And the message again is never, it's never the now. And that's where you have freedom, because you could go paint birds or fishermen or vases or fruit or whatever the hell you want to paint. But when you
Well,
realize that what you're really painting, it'll open a whole nother experience for you.
mhm. As it relates to art, I think that is important too. Um, I I think you mentioned it in your old podcast as well. The question why you are doing this is really important, and I had to ask myself too. I used to drive my mom nuts asking her why about everything, and
Mm-hmm.
and I stopped somewhere along the line. I think the school and work kind of beat it out of me.
Mm.
Conformity is something that you're rewarded for, but I'm trying to get it back. And I was asking myself, why do I want to do art?
Mm.
And uh, I caught myself trying to satisfy what is commonly expected, as
Mm-hmm.
far as having a series of work that related to each other, having a niche, having something that is different, even if it is ugly. Uh, the things that many of which really wasn't important to me or I didn't agree with. Uh, and asking the question why I wanted to do this started helping me with which direction I wanted to go. And freedom in enjoying it was turned out to be much more important to me than anything else. I think a lot of people that get to the art uh, business in any format, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts, performing arts,
Mm-hmm.
anything, they do it mostly for the joy of it. And some people don't want to admit it, that it is at the base of it a selfish act. It is not to save the world. It is those things that can come to play. For me, that is one of the 3 important factors, because when I go to Amsterdam, stand in front of Rembrandt's painting, and I can't move,
Mm-hmm.
I want to give that feeling to somebody else at some point. It's that is one part of it, but the other 2 are kind of selfish. One of it is because I want to be immortal,
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else that want to be either go to be a president of a country or want to make millions of dollars, have it in their bank account, being the richest man alive, or anything else. Most of it, or even having kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of that is an attempt to be immortal. And I think part of it for me is that I want to have, when I see a painting on my wall and I know the painter is dead and I still feel connected to him, I know he's still around. I kind of want that too. And it is selfish. It is not a grand uh, gesture. And I'm sure that the whole painting
No, I
business,
think I'm going to swear for a second. I think that's bullshit.
yeah.
I think it is selfish, and that is a grand gesture. The
Hmm.
idea that the culture would say, "Oh, you selfish person, how dare you?" Right? That creates a resistance in us. And it's like, how dare me? How dare you encourage me to die? Right? When it is our very nature to live. And to live, the reason, people say, well, it sounds selfish because you want to be immortal. Well, go suck on a rotten egg, because I am immortal. And all I'm trying to do is express who I am, period. And you are immortal. Go express who you are. And that's where the artists are beautiful, because we have, when we're free, we have an audacity to live. And we choose to live through our artwork, right? I mean, that's how we are going to be remembered. I think it's like confidence, right? Most people don't know what confidence looks like. So when they see authentic confidence, they often mistake it for arrogance. But it's a very, very subtle flow of energy. So if, like I always say, confidence is, I'm so great, how can I help you? Or how can I be of service to you? Arrogance is, I'm so great, do this for me. Right? It's just a shift of energy. The source is the same. I am great. I know what I have of value. The question is, will you be of service, or do you want slaves? Right? Or do you want servants? And it's that intention. So I read a great book years ago called The Art of Selfishness. It was incredible. Yeah. And, and it was written back, I think, in the 20s or the 40s or something like that. And they talked about back then, like, a woman who's in a marriage where the husband is beating her, she's considered selfish for staying in that marriage, right? And the guy said, well, it's kind of stupid, because a marriage is a contract, it's an agreement, and therefore, if you were in agreement with a business partner and that partner began to abuse you, you would leave the contract. You would leave that relationship. And yet, in marriage, you stay. It doesn't matter if you're dying. It doesn't matter, if you're wasting your existence away. You stay. And so he was writing, he was a psychologist, and he would talk about these different cases that he had, and he tackled all these different ways that people are taught that selfishness is bad, and ultimately it just leads to their demise, right? And so it was a brilliant book. So I would encourage you, every time you hear the word selfish, to scream back at it and put it in its place. Because,
I'm telling you, you got to switch to therapy. The other thing I was going to mention is that just the sheer joy of doing this is something that I'm okay with. I have talked to different people, and they are not the same. I talked to this guy at the office that was telling me that he just filled out the form and got $6 million from the feds for Maryland, and you could tell he was proud of it. He felt like the $6 million man. It's like Steve Austin, I think he was his name. And he really enjoyed doing that, and he felt like he just added $6 million value. And I am different from that. To me, the farmer that did the work, that paid the tax, did the work. This guy just shifted the money, and that, to me, has no value at all. But to him, it did. And he should be okay with it, and he should enjoy it. But to me, slapping paint on a canvas is something that I really enjoy. It's just every minute of it, I feel fulfilled. Now, if you tell Elon Musk what he thinks about it, he's probably going to laugh his butt off, saying that that's ridiculous. He's not adding any value to anything. So it's you got to be okay with what you're doing and think why you're doing it. And once you answer those questions, I think you'll be in the right path. And for me, my audience for this conversation are people like me that
Mm-hmm.
they have uh, sold their soul to the devil early on, or at least rented it, and and they as long as they rented it for a good price, and there's a buyback program, I think it is perfectly fine. Um, I hear a lot of
Now, what do you
conversations.
mean by that, real quick? What do you mean by that? By
Well,
they
I
sold
hear
themselves, they sold themselves or rented themselves to the devil for a little
well
bit.
well I hear a lot of podcasts that I listen to with artists. Uh, they glamorize the idea of these artists that early on they went for after their passion, and they slept under the bridge with roaches and suffered through a lot of hardship. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Went to the art school for 4 years and had a lot of debt, and went to the ateliers and practiced for another 20, 30 years. And uh, that is idealized as the way to do art. And it is, I admire a lot of these people that did that, but I think it is perfectly fine to have a day job and do your art part time. And it is okay if you haven't done that for most of your life and start late. Uh, all of that is okay. To me, I see a lot of professional artists that do like 12, 16-hour day work, and it seems like 70% of their time goes to the business of art. And when they do art, a lot of times it is to satisfy the customers or the galleries, and maybe 5-10% of their time they're exploring, they're enjoying uh, doing art as they envisioned earlier. So if you are going to uh, have a small percentage of your time as a full-time artist doing what you really like to do, to me is okay. To have a day job that you maybe like but not love, and do something part-time that you love. The proportions are still the same. So I want to encourage people, folks that do have some passion, whether or not it's music, it is poetry, it's writing, it's art, that have suspended it for most of their life. They're waiting for retirement or part of their life to be over to start that. I just want to encourage them to not wait any longer. It is that adds to the rest of their life. When I go sit in a meeting in the office, that might not be uh, as exciting as when I sit in front of my canvas. I do better because last night I did some painting.
Hmm.
So that's what I meant. The contrast between, as far as renting your soul goes, what I meant was, like, when I was growing up, nobody ever around me talked about art and painting as a profession. You had to either be a doctor or an engineer. Uh, my exposure to art was basically as entertainment. In first
Mm-hmm.
first time, we had uh, arts classes even in elementary school and early ages. The first memory of doing art, I remember there was a cow we were supposed to paint, and we did or draw. We did our drawings, and then they said the art teacher got sick and didn't show up. So uh, I just added a little more to my cow and made it a bowl, and very well endowed bowl. And I was pretty proud of my adjustment to my painting and showed it to all my classmates and got a lot of laughter. And then they announced that the teacher has made it. So he came to the class and asked for assignments. So I hid mine, and one of my not so kind classmates said that no, he did his homework and he did a pretty good job. So that got me suspended. So my first feedback to my art wasn't that positive. So for a while I didn't do as many of them.
I got suspended for something very similar to that. I if it wasn't, I think I was in a math class, and I used to draw like creatures and monsters, and I was drawing the back of this monster being, right? And it was like a humanoid, like a figure. And so it was strong. So I drew the big back muscles, and, but I was like in middle school, so I didn't really know the anatomy necessarily. And because it was a monster, I was like, I drew it like a Smurf tail on it instead of like some long tail, just a little tail, and put the pants on him, and to me it was very clear that this was the back of this monster. But when the teacher saw it, they read it as the front of the monster. And so they thought they thought my back muscles were his chest, and his tail was a penis, and so I had to go, and I remember them bringing my parents in, and I got suspended for it, and I was like, "Well, can't you see it's a tail?"
That's why you can relate.
Yeah,
that's why I don't do as many nude paintings, because I get flashbacks.
That's funny. I do think a lot of artists, even ones who are working, sell their, or rent, as you said, their soul to the devil. I think it's a very human thing. Many years, I used to always wonder what this quote unquote devil thing was. And in very close study, I realized a pattern in the literature that talks about the devil. And this is the pattern that I found. The pattern is his weapon is self-doubt. Period. So, whatever it is that you are, or you get understanding of who you are, it's quote unquote the devil, whatever this thing is, this energy, whatever this thing is, it's responsibility, it's duty. The reason why it was, in a sense, ordained and created is to come and ask one very simple question. If you say you are what you are, then why don't you do this?
Yeah.
And if you answer that question, you fail. If you answered that question, then you have given in, and therefore the power that you are, you have given over. And if you're an artist, then why don't you do this? Oh, well, I probably should do that, shouldn't I? It sounds right. It sounds logical. But what you just said is that you're not an artist unless you do A, B, or C.
Yeah.
And now you lost your power.
Well, they like I've heard folks say that I have to do this. I'm an oil painter. I can't do anything else. It's just it's like a path that is chosen for me. That is not the case for me. I need to be creative, and many formats would satisfy that need. My degree was in mechanical engineering, but I did engineering work for a while, and I got into software. I always found a way to be creative. I loved designing solutions with softwares, and first time I wrote any code at all when I came to US was the first time I touched the computer. And first 2 days I wrote a program, wrote a screensaver, and I loved it. Even if it was a digital exercise, it was the fact that it was graphic. It helped me enjoy it. The fact that it was there was a lot of discovery that I still enjoy with oil painting. It was there. Those components are in a lot of places. I have done cold work with glass. I have done sculpture. I have done what we call vitrai in Iran, like painting on glass with paste and clear paint. Uh, Anytime that I've done like animation work, I've done um, digital compositions, anything that has those components in it, as far as there's exploration, discovery, and creative process in it, I can enjoy it. And so to me, I don't find oil painting as to be the only option for me. It's just uh, the best option because like glass blowing requires a lot of energy, and that your products is not as easily saved, and it's not as practical. I can do oil painting a lot more.
What I hear you saying in that, and I want to commend you on this, is that you've separated the medium. We call it the medium in the message, right? It's that experience of creating something, which honestly is what goes on between your ears.
Mm-hmm.
It's right. It's like, oh, I see it. Now, how you actually express it? Do you want to tap dance? Do you want to paint on a canvas? Do you want to sing it? Do you want to sculpt it? Do you want like that's a different skill. The creativity happens in your head. The creativity, the ability to see into the invisible, find solve problems, organize things out of chaos, bring order to things, heal. You know, to me, that's really what the artist is doing. And then to actually manifest that, you use a medium, and it may be in paint or it might be code. I've talked to programmers who, when they program, it's like writing poetry or music to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I get that. So I want to commend you on that you have that sensitivity. I remember I was once talking to my mom about her church or something, and I made a comment, and she she quickly scolded me. And she says, "Don't." She said, "Don't mistaken my love for my traditions as my faith."
Mm-hmm.
And that separation, I think is so clear, and I look at that as art. Like, your medium is your traditions, your ability to see and to communicate ideas in unique ways, or see into your subject into a unique way. To me, that's the artistry. That's the art.
Good. Very good. Go ahead.
So you're painting now.
Yes.
And in a couple of years, like 10 years from now, what would you like to be? Where would you like to see yourself in terms of art?
I would like to see myself in a huge studio with a big north window, financed by selling my patent for the poopless dog I've been thinking about.
The poopless dog?
Yes. Just imagine if you do come up with that, everybody's going to go for that. If you had the option between getting a dog that you don't have to bend over and pick the poops for when you go for a walk, wouldn't you get one?
No.
All right, maybe I need to think about the different business ideas. How about pills? Like,
I just give it to my kids and have them walk it and clean its poop up.
How about the constipation-inducing pills for 1 hour, 3 hour, and 5 hour walks?
Oh, for the dog? So you don't.
Yes.
That's a good idea. Hey,
All right,
that's better.
The fact that you just said for the dog, that tells me there might be lawsuits coming up with that one.
Well,
All right,
sometimes
maybe.
you need to. You're on the way to a meeting and you're a little nervous, so you got to stop and get a little Pepto
All
Bismol or
right,
something.
I need to work. I need to work on the ideas how I'm gonna finance that studio. But
There's actually a movie that was created with Jack Black, and he created that thing, but it was a spray, and when the dog pooped, you would spray it, and it would make the poop go, like it would disappear, right? No one knew where it went; it just disappeared.
wow.
And I believe it all. Like every time it did it, it kind of like went into this place, and they found this big pile of crap somewhere else. But he got filthy, filthy rich off of it, and it was a funny movie.
Okay, I diverged from the subject a lot. You said in 5 years where I see myself. I usually think of future in terms of not as much my professional life in art as I do in uh, what I would be doing and how differently I would be doing things. I hope in 5 years I would be a little more intentional with the way I produce my work. As I told you, right now I'm kind of all over the place, and I'm enjoying it. But I see a lot of work that I'm impressed by. There's a Russian gentleman locally here. His name is Victor. I forgot his last name. I have to look at my cheat sheet here. Artist. Nizovtsev. He does a lot of mermaids because the customer demands it. But I've seen the other works that he does. He spends a lot of time in design that you probably would love. See his work, and he spent a very small proportion of his work actually painting his work, and I just love what he does.
Does he have a team of painters?
No.
Like a studio? Or you're just saying
No,
that he's spending more time focusing on the idea
yes.
and the design, and then executes it quickly in paint.
Yes, he was an illustrator, so he tried to spend a lot of time coming with ideas as far as what he does. My intention is down the road. Right now, I am trying to understand how reality works and how to reproduce it. And the only value that has for me is that I can make what's in my imagination more convincing. So down the road.
So you're saying, let me hear you. You're saying the ideas that are in your head you want to make more convincing, and so one way of doing that is learning how to make reality work. And
exactly.
by that you mean learning how to draw and paint,
yes.
quote unquote more realistic. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, but I don't intend to, like, the work that I've done so far. It is more on the side of realism that I would like to be down the road. The only use I have for reality is to make those emotions and thoughts in a format that it can be communicated to.
Let me drop this in there in your toolbox. That is not how it's done.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how is it done?
In all honesty, if you only have a short amount of time, because you're not 20, that's ultimately going to be the biggest dead end and the most frustrating. Going through trying to copy nouns. I call it copying, like being able to paint realistically the noun in order to convey emotion, because a noun is made of matter. Emotion is not matter, it's energy. And so you have to figure out, how do you create the vibration inside your painting? And that's the part that's unseen. You have to learn how to see. It's funny. This is where a lot of artists get it twisted. Some get this, but some get it twisted. They think I have to master what you see. I have to paint what I see, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is a great master knows how to manage the invisible parts of a painting because that's actually what the person feels. The design, the composition is what you feel. What you paint is what you see, but it's not what you see that moves people. It's what they feel. And
you might have saved me 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of people who their skill sets are incredible. They can paint anything that you would think it's real and then pick it up, and it has no life because life is energy.
See, that's what I'm afraid of. I don't want to turn into a really good camera down the road.
Yeah.
The closer it is to what a camera can do, the more of a feel I get that I may have wasted my time.
So, who are some of your favorite master artists?
Oh, as far as people that are still around, there's a gentleman. I have a problem pronouncing his name. Huihan, Huhan Liu. I think he's down in California, but he teaches in Scottsdale. If you Google his work,
yeah, let me do that right now so I can see, because I want to see the pattern in those that speak to you. So you said, spell his name.
This is Huihan. His last name is Liu.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
His work is nothing like what I'm painting now, but I would love to be able to go to that direction.
That's beautiful. Okay, and I'm almost certain the Russian artist that you were talking about that's near you, is that kind of almost in a similar direction? Do you think?
No, he's actually very different as far as the style of his work goes. But what I like about what he does is that how he brings things from his imagination onto the canvas. I wouldn't want to exactly paint it in his style, but I just love the design and planning that he does.
And you know his last name or how to spell it?
Yes. His first name is Victor. His last name is Nizov.
I got it. Yep.
Now you're going to see a lot of.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a very nice guy too. He doesn't get on social media, or he works mostly through a gallery. I think he tried to not to be bothered by people as much and paint more. But I've seen some of his work that you don't see with just Googling it, because those are not the ones he sell more.
Sure.
That tells me he's really skill-wise. He's pretty impressive, and he can do anything. He just does more of the stuff that sells.
Yeah, and the Russians are really incredible craftsmen when it comes to their work. It's interesting that he's an illustrator, because I think the biggest issue that I have with Russian artists is the lack of imagination oftentimes, but their skill is absolutely incredible. Like their ability to paint, their ability to draw. In Russia, because they were closed off for so long and they didn't have this wave of abstract expressionism that contaminated art for them, their focus on composition. You know, you go to a Russian school, you might spend 5 years learning composition. Here, you might get, if you're lucky, 2 classes on it in a 4-year experience, right? So,
I heard they bring horses as models so they can paint them, and I find myself attracted to a lot of work from Russian artists a lot, but there's ton of artists that I like.
So give me 2 dead ones. 2 dead artists
Dead artists. I liked Albert Bierstadt. Recently, like a couple of weeks ago, we were in Madrid and went to Prado Museum. And these guys, I haven't heard of them before, but Jose Moreno had his last name is Carbonell. I Carbonero. He had a large piece in there that I was just stuck in front of it for half hour. I couldn't move. He looked like he could do any texture you can imagine, and with amazing brushwork. I was pretty impressed by that one, and Sargent, of course, is everybody's probably hero. In DC, he has a landscape painting in there that I don't know if you have been to National Art Museum. It's just a hill, and you are standing 2 feet away from it, and it's just a gigantic mess. And you just back up; it just comes together like magic. And for the life of me, I can't imagine how he does this. This is my latest painting. Is a Asian lady in a kimono that I'm painting, and I'm trying to. For the first time, I put this in our living room that has a family room that has a little more space, so I can back up. And I realized that is really essential in order to be able to paint that kind of thing. And I've started playing around with it, and I love it. There's like the flowers in this lady's kimono. I just started making a mess instead of painting flowers, and I back up, and it turns into flowers. I just love it.
That's awesome. Very nice. Very nice. If you know the painting, or or if you can find it online, send me a link of it, and I'll do you a favor. I'll go ahead and analyze it.
Sure.
That landscape one from the Sargent. And because these guys were engineers, they engineered their paintings, and they weren't intuitive as we often think of it. They were much more deliberate and intentional. Sometimes they would spend a year working out the problems and the solutions in a painting. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have this done in a week and a half. And when you get in there and actually rip it apart from, I'm going to use the word, an engineer's mind perspective, because you have that background. It's incredible the amount of intelligence that is required to pull off masterpieces, and and to do it consistently. I mean, these guys painted a lot, but they also, their work is incredible over and over and over again. But I still love Norman Rockwell, and that's when it hit me. I was like, this guy consistently delivered.
I liked him.
And so that to do that, there had to be a system behind it. It wasn't I'm going to wake up and run around the room 3 times and kill a chicken and hope that, this invisible thing fills my body and I can paint, like he's possessed or something. Like, I think a lot of artists think like that's what happens. Like, oh, I'm waiting for the inspiration to get my masterpiece, and these guys went to work. It was
indeed. I just sent Sargent image to your Facebook, by the way. It is, but you have to see it in person. It just the image just doesn't do justice.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Let me click on it here. Oh, yeah. Oh.
It would, as I said, you need to kind of stand 2 feet away from it to see what I'm talking about.
Well, what you're talking about is those brush strokes, right? I mean,
and the color and temperature shifts. The way that he, in the shadows, he has both cools and warms mixed, but in the right values. I would never have guessed those things next to each other would work. Like 5 years from now, when you're asking, one of the things I would like to be able to do much better is understand the subtleties of the relationship between those temperature shifts and color shifts, both in shadows and in light. And the relationship with everything. Every day when I paint something new, it make me realize that it's all relativity. It's not as important what the absolute values and what the absolute colors and temperatures are as it is how they relate to each other.
Well, yeah, I would use the word relate far more than relative.
Yeah.
um, but it's all when it comes to color. The most important aspect of color is the value, because once your values are correct and it works at that level, then you actually have quite freedom. You have a freedom in whatever colors you want. You could almost use,
Yeah.
as long as there's some logic to it, but you could almost use whatever you want in terms of color if the values work. If the values don't work, then uh, it will destroy your painting.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm looking at this image here real quick, and there's about three things that I see right off the bat that are just incredible in terms of delivering a visual experience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a concept we called changing the charge, where
Yeah.
when we design something, we intentionally design a minimum of two emotions in a painting.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why Norman Rockwell said it was one of the secrets to his success, that he can make you feel two emotions. And so, let's say if you looked at one of his paintings and a boy was coming home from the war and mom was running out with her arms open, screaming, and all the little boys and girls in the neighborhood were running towards him, and dad was, walking with with pep in his step. There's all this activity and energy flowing towards this boy who's coming home from the war. That's one emotion. But off in the corner, hiding right around the house, very, very still, very, very quiet, was the boy's little sweetheart, right?
Yeah.
And so to have these two different energies uh, deliberately composed in the piece, it causes a shift. And when we feel
Mm-hmm.
that shift, it does several things. Now the painting becomes animated because we've actually moved through time, because we had to shift from one state to another state. These are the little tricks that make you actually feel the magic. And so
Mm.
Sargent does that, and he has at least three, if not four, shifts going on in this painting. So if you look at the first, up front, you see the waterfall, you see the rocks. All of that is,
Mm.
if you go through it, they're just these little tiny diagonals that constantly shift your eye up and down, and you feel this movement. But as you go back,
Mm.
and you also feel this beautiful curve going on in the front of the picture too. But as you go back, it becomes more of this more straight diagonal and long motions.
Oh yeah.
Then you go back further. Now we're going vertical, and then when you hit the sky, it's a slight angle, but it's very, very calm, right?
Mm.
That back sky compared to the energy that's in the front. So really, as your eye is moving, you're going from this chaotic energy, and you're ascending into this moment of all peace.
Mm.
When you look at this painting, it literally lifts you to a higher consciousness, right?
Yeah. I think you're perfectly right there. The art is about contrast. So it's in music. You see it in performing art, and yet he has done it here perfectly too.
Yeah, that's a beautiful painting, man.
It is.
So that's cool. I like the artist that you're looking at. I brought up the Bierstadt, with his landscapes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Gorgeous design work. And then I like this
Now
illustrator.
those the 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 there's something different about each artist that attract me. It is not. I generally am not too attracted to landscape painting at this moment, but the level of skills and mastery of uh, controlling paint to represent light in a lot of these landscapes are a skill that I think is essential no matter what you paint.
So let me ask you this. When you say representing light, right, what is it? Like, how do
Well,
you represent light?
Well, what I mean is that the way that light interacts with every texture, like the Sargent painting you were just looking at, if you see how the light is hitting top of those hills where there's vegetation and grass, the feeling of texture you get from that, then when the light is hitting this big rock up front, is completely different. You still feel like you're looking at the reflection of a light, but the way the paint represent those is mastering the texture in each of these areas, the edges, the color and temperature shifts in any of them. All of those contributes to convincing you that this is a rock and that's grass on top of the hill. And those, I think, whether or not you're showing something on the edge of a kimono or you're painting a landscape, I think a lot of principles are the same.
Absolutely.
It's just, and I don't believe I understand all of them well enough yet.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're talking about light. You're talking about temperature. Okay, these are two things you talked about. How can you hold light in your hand, and how can you hold temperature in your hand?
As I mentioned, when I mention temperature, it's as you call it, the relationship between two colors. If I have a blue, ultramarine blue on a palette and add just a little bit of green to it and make a new color next to it, there's a temperature between the two right away. And that's the only thing I'm concerned about, just the relationship between them. I don't care about calling one of them warm or calling one of them cool, as long as one of them is warmer than the other one and the other one is cooler. And then the relation between those two and another color that I might have next to them that might be red or completely different. What I mean, that's how I would hold it in my hand. If those relationships, I get them right, and when I put them on a canvas that is supposed to represent something, whether it's a shiny metal, piece of metal, or it's a fuzzy fabric on somebody's clothes, if I get those things right, I think I'm in the right place, and I'm holding them in my hand. Otherwise, where I am right now, I get lucky with them sometimes, and when I play with paint, I get what I want and I use it, but I don't have the mastery of it.
Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense. Cool. Very cool. All right. So I was gonna go down a different route than you took it, but that's all good.
Well, go on the route you wanted to go.
Are you sure?
We'll find out.
See, I liked everything you said, right? Up until the point where you brought it back to the representation. And and this is where I want to be very, oh man, hold on one second. I'm looking at that Sargent painting. There's this beautiful, gorgeous purple. Hold on, let me cover that up real quick. Oh, wait, that's gorgeous. Oh, yeah. He has this mark on a rock. It's this gorgeous purple. Do you see that? Like almost if you come straight down to the center to the bottom, maybe about an inch of, depending on the image that you're looking at. There's these rocks there that have this little purple mark on it. Do you see that? Okay. If you cover that up, all of a sudden, all of those rocks in that area die. They go
Mm.
mute. But once you expose it, that purple activates, it becomes the key that
Mm.
activates the yellow in all of that, then it becomes very, very hot and alive. And you just cover
Yeah,
that little purple, then it goes.
that's the relationship I was talking about.
Yeah. See, to me, that has nothing to do with rocks, right? But it has to do all with relationship, understanding, um, how to turn things on, turn things off. And
Yep.
he paints this painting to give a context so that we can say, oh, well, it's a rock, it's this, blah, blah, blah. But then he's exploring all of these relationships, with color, values, textures, things like that. But in a context that, we can, our mind can say, oh, okay, I can see this now. I can experience it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'd really encourage you, to stay free, meaning give
Hmm.
yourself the appropriate boundaries, right?
Yep.
That you need. And that's what drawing is, at least in my
Mm.
perspective, right? A good drawing, a good line drawing gives you the appropriate boundaries because it problem solves a lot of the issues in a painting. And then with inside that, then become a master of value. If you want something to feel like there's a great light source, then that's light and dark, right? And then
Yeah.
within that, then you can have this tremendous amount of freedom to explore and go crazy with your brush strokes, with your colors. And the reason why you have that freedom is because almost anything you do can't break the painting as long as you, um, don't violate, your drawing, right? Or violate your values.
Gotcha.
You know, once if especially the values in painting,
Hmm.
you know. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah, the value wise, I'm kind of starting to get a hang of it. A couple of practice pieces I did from Charles Bark drawing course
Hmm.
helped a lot.
Good.
I always wonder why art students waste so much time on these things. Now I see why.
I train my students in a almost a paint by numbers,
Mm.
value system, and so we use 9 values depending if they're doing more of a graphic piece. We'll do 5,
Hmm.
and all the way in the beginning when we're doing our notins, we'll use 3 values: black, white, and a 50% gray. Um, but I'll have them problem solve almost 90 to 95% of their value issues
Hmm.
without ever mixing paint. And
Hmm.
and so what's nice is when you use a numbering system, when you lay down, let's say, a number 4, and you literally write number 4, well, then
Yeah.
you know that what needs to go next to it needs to be at least a 5. If you want a
Yeah.
high contrast, maybe an 8, that's a
Hmm.
leap of 4. And so you can begin to actually, using numbers,
Hmm.
logically lay out everything and
Mm.
have such control over it. And then you go mix your values or your paints or whatever, and it kind of, quote unquote, feels like paint by numbers. But the reason why is because it just allows you to think through everything before mixing paint. And because what you learn is once you shift one value, let's say you do a painting and you have a rhythm of 4 5 4 5 4 5, and what that means is a lighter value next to a darker value, but it's only one value shift.
Yeah.
That allows the area for your eye to transition with very low friction, right? But
Hmm.
it but
Hmm.
it still has enough clarity that everything in there has its own identity. Okay.
Hmm.
And but if you shift and you change, let's say, one of those 4s into a 5, and it reads 4 5 5 5 4 4, now all of a sudden, because of the values are the same, it loses identity, things blend, you lose information. Um,
Yeah.
and so to fix it, now you have to, once you shift one value, it's like almost, 1/5 of your painting has to change because all the values that relate to it next to it have to now adjust. And so it's just a very quick way of thinking through everything before jumping in.
Yeah, that is definitely something that saves a lot of times if you have the large value relationships resolved first before you
Yeah.
get to the end of the painting. I find myself with some of these figures that I did for practice. I did all of them in oil instead of charcoal or pencil because I'm kind of a senior citizen, don't have any time left. I don't want to relearn it again in oil. And I found out that at the end of it, I end up worrying about shifting the values from like 5 to 5.1 and 5.2 in certain areas to make sure I sculpt the form correctly. And in the beginning, I'm worried about the values like 1 and 5 and 7, mostly just to make sure the large shapes have the, as you mentioned, correct relationship. And that helps a lot. Just having the right sequence of activities.
And using those smaller ones, like you were saying, like, 3, just a couple of them, that's where the carrying power comes into conversation. Like you said earlier, you want to capture the eye first, and then the heart, and then the mind. And so, I always say a painting is kind of like a beautiful woman. You walk in a bar, you see her across the room, you're like, damn, I'm going to go buy her a drink, right? And so you walk up, and then...
Oh, I have no comments on that since my wife just walked in.
Well, fair enough. So it's like...
Okay. Just kidding.
And, but then, so she's got the beauty, but then you go and try to have a conversation, and all she's doing is, moving her finger in circles in the beer drops that's on the table. And you're like, so, what's your name? She's like, name? What's a name? Right? You're like, and, and so there's no brain there. Right. So, and so to me, a painting is very much like you have to design it to attract the eye from across the room. It's called carrying power. Yes. And then once the person comes up to the painting, then you have to have a macro conversation, right? And at that level, that has to hit the heart, like you said. But then when they spend time with it, then it has to stimulate the brain and like, like, and so a good strategy for that is, especially with values, is to start with those 3, break it down to 5 or whatever, and then get into those micro values to really define things to what experience. So, all right. So let me ask you one more question before I have you tell people how to connect with you.
Sure.
Something that I've been thinking about all the way from the beginning of this conversation that I have to know.
Okay.
What's one of your favorite Persian foods?
Oh, just
See
one?
how I shift it? Well, we're just saying one, but that'll lead into a couple. I like that. Do you cook any? Do you cook any Persian food?
I did, but my wife said, "Don't do this again."
So, is there a restaurant that you guys go to?
Actually, yes, near us. Actually, I'm in Maryland, in United States, and north of Baltimore, there is a place called House of Kebab on Hartford Road, and they always have a buffet. And if you have never had Persian food, that is the perfect way to sample everything, so you get a good idea what the highlights are. And the thing about this place is that they have unlimited tahdig. This is kind of crispy rice. Tah means bottom, dig means pot. This
you guys eat that too?
Oh, so you know about it?
Yeah, I'm Puerto Rican, man. We eat that burnt part of the rice at the bottom of the pot.
This is where like wars break out in Iran over the tahdig, because usually there's a limited amount of it if you go to somebody's house. And they offer you like a piece of theirs. That's love. You just have to give them a hug.
Nice, nice. That's
Now,
good.
this place is the only place I know that has unlimited amount of it. Now, the
How?
way I have it, and Persians have usually the basic Persian food is rice.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have different kind of rice, but rice with some sort of a stew next to it,
Mm.
then you put it on top of the rice and eat it with that. Now, what I do is I put those stew on top of the tahdig. That
Mm.
softens it up, and this is something you can't do in regular Persian restaurants. You have to order the tahdig separately if they do have it. So in this place, not only you can get that, you get a good they have like Persian foods. Uh, they have fesenjun, they have qeime, and they have korma sabzi, which is my favorite. Our main Persian foods. There's a lot of other ones, but if I
So
had to,
describe the last one. What is that?
korma sabzi, it is basically assortment of different type of vegetables that are fried with
Mm.
beans and with meat, uh, mixed together as a stew that you use with rice. Now, this thing, as I told you, I was a refugee. I lived in Pakistan for 2 years, and I was living with 9 other refugees in the same house.
Mm.
So we had the cooking schedule, and korma sabzi was one of them. And over there, to feed 10 people, you had to get like a mountain worth of vegetables, and cleaning them up would take 2 days. And when you fry it, it's just a fistful of vegetables at the end of it you're left with. So this was on the menu. We would try to, if I thought that Warm Sabzi is going to hit me in like 6 weeks, I would make sure I convinced one of the guys to go on vacation or something to throw off the schedule. So a lot of these foods, like fesenjun, is also with like walnut paste. They are really labor intensive.
Mm.
So getting just uh, um, uh, the directions as far as how to make it and make it at home, I wouldn't do that unless you have to. If you know a good place, like if you can get to these kind of places, try them first.
So it sounds like if I'm going to eat it at home, I'm going to need to find myself a long hair Persian dictionary to come.
That would help. But the favorite food actually for me is barbary. That's the like Persian bread, which is really Turks would came up with it. You can find good ones in Turkey as well, and in Iran. Usually, I told you there are different tribes and different um, languages, cultures. Turks are one of the populations in Iran. The Turkish they speak actually is a little bit different than the ones they speak in Turkey. But these guys brought barbary to Iran, and since I was a kid, I was hooked. When my mom told me to go get barbary, she always ordered one extra because I would just nip at it in the back of my bicycle. By the time I got home, one of them was gone. So some
awesome.
people try to plan to cure cancer and make the world a better place. My goal has always been to make the perfect barbary, and recently I finally achieved that goal.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, if you want the best one, in Toronto, there's a place on Yonge Street. It's called Super Khorak. Go over there. You get the best barbary in Northern America. Of course, you have to watch for those like older women that Persian women that elbow you out of the way to get in the front of the line, but it's worth
it. Spell that bread.
BARBARI. And if you go there, the dessert wise, makhlout is something that I have been hooked on for a long time too. That's like Persian ice cream mixed with what they call falude, which is like a frozen noodles made out of starch.
Really? Huh.
Yes.
That's interesting. So it's like ice cream with texture. Or
like
is it
dessert and appetizers more. It is no, the ice cream itself it has the same texture as regular ice cream. It is just have saffron in it, and it has pistachio. The falude, it is kind of it is a slushy, and it
Okay.
has like really thin noodles. There are two separate desserts, but makhlut means mixed. Mixing
Oh,
these
okay.
two together is kind of something I like, and they do too.
Wow, man, you're making me
If you want to
hungry.
experiment, drop frozen grapes into pomegranate juice. That's a cool thing too.
Just frozen grapes, so the frozen grapes act like almost like ice, then, right?
It does, but what happens is that then the juice starts freezing around it and makes like icicles, and the grapes
Mm.
start.
Uh, did I lose you? Oops. All right, so we're back. So tell me, I'm assuming, I know what assuming can do, um, but I'm assuming you guys eat a lot of lamb, correct?
Yes, actually, growing up, if you went somebody's house and there was not meat in the food, that was kind of an insult.
Really? Huh.
But yeah, the meat was part of most foods. But after I went to Pakistan, and there was a place near our house that they would line up the cows, and these guys would watch their buddies get it slaughtered, and sometimes they would like tie down their legs and it loosen up, and you would see a cow's running down the street with half his head hanging down and blood all over the place. Kind of changed my appetite about a little bit about the meat.
Oh wow, that's kind of gross.
It is.
Um, uh, that wasn't
But it is, yes, but
very halal,
it
I
is a big,
guess.
but no, it is a big part of the recipes and different kind of foods that they have in Iran.
um, and so outside of the bread, what is it? Do you make anything for yourself outside of the bread, or do you when you eat Persian food, it's something that you go out to do? Um,
Well, my uh, wife is an amazing cook. Anything she
mm,
eats is just fantastic. She's kind of an artist with this thing.
Beautiful.
It looks good and it tastes good, and she rarely makes the same thing twice. She looks at the inside the fridge, whatever it is in there,
Hmm.
mix, and she's into gardening, so we have fresh vegetables usually that we pick from the garden,
Hmm.
and because of that, I kind of uh, can't have burgers anymore. And first time
Okay.
when we met, I tried to make a breakfast once, and I kind of got experimental with that and mixed bananas with eggs. And she after that she said, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't do this again." So it kind of
If
worked out for me.
that was an interesting way of getting her to propose to you. Um,
Well, no, that actually she made the plum chicken. That kind of sealed the deal. I think.
oh
Oh
yes.
yeah, that was the first thing she made, and she knew a hungry weak man when she met one, and she knew where the weak points were.
I'll tell you, women and their chicken, man. Like I've told this story several times, but um, the mother of my children, when we were first dating, uh, she was going to go off to school, and I was going to go off to school, and so I went over to her house to basically, end the relationship. And I
Mm.
got there, and she made this chicken, and I ate that chicken, and I'm like, I would be a fool. So somehow we were going to make it work. And it's interesting. I was talking to this one woman who was from Colombia, and she was talking about how in Colombia's one of the things they had like this almost this woman's lib type of thing that went on this liberation of women, and one of the things that was lost was the tradition of cooking. And it was something that she was talking about that she suffered from because she her mom never taught her to cook because our mom's generation was like, we're not going to do that, right? So and she was saying that she read this study that said she was talking, they were interviewing these people who were married for a very long time, and 75% of the men said that one of the reasons for the success of the relationship, 75%, 3 out of 4, was one of the top reasons was because of the food that their wives cooked.
I'm joking about that. She's.
Oh, she sucks at cooking?
No, she's exceptional at that, but that's not the main reason. As far as food goes, I think there's definitely difference between what people are capable of. We can go to a restaurant, she smells the food, and she knows exactly what kind of ingredients are used in it. She knows, like we were talking about the difference between the temperatures of paint. She understands the relationship between different kind of taste, what works with what, and I have no clue.
That's
There's
interesting.
No way I can do any of the stuff she does.
That's cool. So she literally has taste.
It does.
That's awesome. So when she does cook or make things, is it more Italian kind of pulling from her Italian background?
No, she's from her choice of husband. You can tell she's pretty international. She makes food from all over the place. Eastern Europe.
Just likes to cook. Nice.
Yeah. She definitely likes it, and she has tons of cookbooks from everywhere. And
that's
actually,
awesome.
She's the one that taught me how to make Persian ice cream.
Oh, really? Wow,
Yeah.
how cool is that? Nice. Well, Daryoush, did I say it right? I made it all the way
perfectly.
2 hours and I'm still saying it right. Okay, good.
Perfectly.
I'm going to contact you again because I'm planning to go to Baltimore, D.C. area this summer.
Absolutely.
And one of the one of the artists that I was speaking to, we want to get together and maybe get a couple artists together and record an episode, but actually like have real food and maybe go somewhere. I don't know, something, right?
Yeah, please do.
And so
I don't know when you're coming down. I have a show up in Bel Air up here on that. The opening is on 15th and is going on for a month too. So if it is close, you can visit there too.
Yeah, I would think it'll probably happen in July.
Okay.
So there's just a few projects that I'm working on that I'll fully know within about 2 weeks where everything is, and then I'll be able to schedule some time to get down there. But there's some friends and some other artists and stuff that are going to be down there, so I want to.
That would be nice.
Yeah. How can people get in contact with you or connect with you?
My website is the best way to get in touch. There's like links to Facebook, Instagram, and all other social media. And that's www.mossleh is my last name, MOSLEH Mossleh.net.
Okay, cool. And I'll grab that and put that in the show notes so that people can click on it and go right over to it. In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlining structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee. at core80.com.